The smiles, the lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row. Painted faces, masks of stone. A hollow laugh that chills the bone. Puppets dangle strings unseen. Life's a trick, a cruel machine. Do you see it? Do you feel it? Or just believe it? Welcome to the show, it's all pretend. The smiles, the lies, the perfect end. The world's a stage, they run the flow. You clap on cue down in the front row. Running round the carousel, a twisted tune you know too well. Spinning fast and no escape. The curtain falls a final shade.
Welcome back to Breaking the System, the podcast where we examine the beliefs, the perceptions, and structures that shape our world, and ask which ones deserve to be challenged or transformed. And I am your host, and today we're stepping into one of the most paradoxical and powerful days in human history, Good Friday. So a man is arrested at night. He's betrayed by a close friend. He's beaten and mocked and stripped and publicly tortured to death on a wooden cross in front of a jeering crowd. It's a story of suffering and humiliation and apparent defeat. And yet, billions of people across centuries have called this day Good Friday. So why? That single word, good, is where today's episode begins. So let's break it down. And so that's why I wanted to kind of do this podcast today, was what's so good about this Friday in knowing what we just talked about, okay? So as always, let's jump into some historical events and factual information first. Let's look at what they say actually happened. So according to the four gospel accounts of Matthew, Mark, Luke, and John, the sequence unfolds during the Jewish Passover in Jerusalem, most likely in AD 30 or 33, while Pontius Pilate served as Roman governor of Judea. And after sharing the Last Supper with his disciples, Jesus goes to the garden, and there Judas, one of the 12, betrays him with a kiss and hands him over to a group of temple guards and Roman soldiers. There Jesus is first taken before the Jewish High Council, where he's accused of blasphemy. Well, why? For claiming to be the Messiah and the Son of God, because the Jewish leaders did not have the legal authority under Roman occupation to carry out a death sentence. They bring him to Pontius, the Roman prefect. Pilate interrogates Jesus and repeatedly states he finds no grounds for execution. He even offers the crowd a Passover custom, the release of a prisoner. And the crowd, influenced by the chief priests, chooses Barabbas, a known insurrectionist and murderer, over Jesus. And under mounting pressure from the crowd shouting, "Crucify him," over and over and over, Pilate ultimately washes his hands of the matter and sentences Jesus to death by crucifixion. And so Jesus is scourged with Roman whip, crowned with thorns, mocked as the king of the Jews, and forced to carry his cross to Golgotha, the place of the skull, outside the city walls. And there around 9 a.m. he is nailed to a cross between two criminals. A sign placed above his head reads some version of Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. And he hangs for roughly 6 hours, enduring extreme pain, blood loss, dehydration, and eventual suffocation. And the Gospels record his final words, including expressions of things like forgiveness, abandonment, and surrender. And he dies around 3 p.m. His body is removed before sunset to honor the beginning of the Sabbath and laid in a new tomb provided by Joseph of Arimathea. This event takes place 2 days before what Christians celebrate as Easter Sunday, the day of the claimed resurrection. So let's talk about the brutal reality of a Roman crucifixion here. And so crucifixion was not a religious symbol in the first century. It was a state of sponsored terror tactics used by the Roman Empire. Rome reserved the punishment primarily for people like slaves, rebels, pirates, and anyone seen as a direct threat to the imperial order. It was deliberately public, it was slow, it was degrading, and victims were often stripped naked, bound or nailed to a crossbeam, and raised up so everyone could see their suffering. Death came gradually from things like shock and infection and exhaustion and asphyxiation, as the body's weight made breathing increasingly difficult or almost impossible. Roman and Jewish historians like Tacitus, I don't want to butcher these names because I always do, and Josephus confirmed the practice. Josephus describes mass crucifixions during the Jewish revolt, with soldiers sometimes nailing victims in grotesque positions just for amusement, right? Just to get a laugh. And the fact that Jesus, a Jewish teacher from Galilee, received this extreme penalty suggests the Romans viewed him not merely as a religious troublemaker, but as a potential political threat. And the mocking title, King of the Jews, was likely Pilate's way of warning anyone who might challenge Caesar's authority. And so modern scholarship, even among non-Christian historians, overwhelmingly agrees that Jesus of Nazareth was executed by crucifixion under Pontius Pilate around 30 to 33 AD. And this is one of the most established facts about his life. And so one of the most disturbing parts of the story is how quickly the crowd turned, right? And this is where we can look at today's society, okay? So just days earlier, many of the same people had welcomed Jesus into Jerusalem with palm branches and shouts of Hosanna. Probably butchered that name as well. But now they demanded his execution. So why? Well, there's 4 different reasons. We have group thinking and mob mentality, which we see a lot today, especially with riots, or protests that turn into mob riots. And so the mob mentality under the tension of Passover in a crowded, occupied city, right? The more people you get together, the more that you crowd them in, the more it gets hot, and people just don't like each other, okay? And that gets that mob mentality. The second one would be fear. The chief priests warned that Jesus' movement could bring Roman crackdowns on the entire Jewish nation. So they put fear into people, just like we've seen during COVID. Next, we have authority and social pressure. When leaders and the crown aligned, individual conscience often collapses, right? Social pressure, we see this a lot in high school, grade school, even sometimes in the workplace, or on your social media platforms like Facebook and X and Instagram and all those others. Okay? And so 4, betrayal from within. Judas's actions for the price of 30 pieces of silver highlight how personal disappointment or self-interest can fracture loyalty. Okay? And that's a big one too. Betrayal from someone that you trust with your life, right? Betrayal from within the group or from within society. And so Pilate, the man with the actual power, symbolically washes his hands but still yields to the pressure rather than standing on his own judgment of innocence. And this pattern, systems of power, crowds, and fear overriding truth, is not ancient history. It's a system that repeats itself across time in things like politics, institutions, social movements, and everyday group dynamics. Good Friday exposes how easily human systems can condemn the innocent when it serves self-preservation, or we try to maintain or maintains the status quo, right? And so let's get into why it's called Good Friday. So on the surface, there's nothing good about torture, and especially an unjust execution. But in Christian theology, the day is called good because it is the ultimate outcome, not the event itself. Christians believe Jesus' death was a willing sacrificial act, the innocent taking the penalty for humanity's wrongdoing, opening the way for things like forgiveness, reconciliation with God, and ultimately resurrection. The apparent defeat of the cross becomes the foundation for hope and new life. And in some languages, the name reflects the sorrow, right? Sorrow Friday. Sorry about that. Let me turn that off here. And so some reflects the sorrow of Sorrowful Friday. But in English, the word good for something greater can be reborn or born again. And so let's look into the modern reflection. Good Friday challenges us to examine the systems that we live under, religious, political, social, and personal. It asks, when do we, like the crowd, choose Barbossa, the familiar, the violent, the status quo option instead of truth? When do we, like Pilate, wash our hands and go along with injustice and avoid conflict? Where in our own lives have we had to experience a kind of crucifixion, a painful loss or a failure or a breaking, before real growth or transformation could emerge? And so the systems that need changed often resist until something breaks. And sometimes that breaking looks like defeat in the moment. And yet history, in this story in particular, shows it can become the seed of something far greater. And so we get to the conclusion here. On this episode, we walked through kind of the historical brutality of Good Friday and how actual brutal that scenario was for Jesus and the psychological forces that were at play. And not only that, the profound meaning that turned a day of death into a day millions call Good Friday. And so the real power of the story isn't just religion, right? And it's a mirror held up to every human system that claims authority or demands conformity and fears genuine transformation. Okay? And so that's going to lead into our critical thinking question, right? Something that I'm going to leave you with. If something in your life or in our larger systems, and by that we're talking about any system in play that we all rely on, right? If those had to break, if it had to die, if it had to be sacrificed in order for something truer, freer, or better to emerge, would you be able to recognize it as good while you're still in the middle of the pain? Okay, so that's our first question. Okay, can you recognize something that's painful and that hurts and that is life-changing as something good in the end or in the moment, right? Do we see that those things can lead us to something better, grander tomorrow, right? And I think we have to look inside ourselves and do we possess that power within ourselves individually, okay? And the second part of that is, or would the pressure of the crowd and the fear of the unknown make you choose the Barabbas or the familiar instead? And I think for a lot of people, they answered this question during COVID, right? There was a lot of people that got hurt because they chose not to take the jab. So they lost their life. Or not their life. They lost their job. And maybe they had to move. Maybe they had to pull their kids from public school or whatever school that they were in. Or maybe they had to transfer schools because the college or the university was going to force them to do this. Okay? And so some people, they conformed, right? They went with the pressure of the crowd and they done what was asked of them. And some of us, we didn't. We fought back. We refused. In knowing that, yes, it's going to be painful. Yes, it's going to hurt. Yes, we might lose our job. We might lose our education. We might not be able to get our degree at where we're going, or we might have to transfer and pick up the family and move to a different state. Some of us realized that. But in the end, we did that because we knew that the good was going to come out of not conforming to the pressure of the government and the media and whoever else was trying to shove that ideology down our throats. Okay? So that's our two questions I want you to think of tonight. In times of trouble and pain and heartbreak, can you see that sacrifice is for something truer and freer and better to emerge at the end of it? Not saying that it will, but can you see something good coming out of it? Okay? Or are you going to pressure? Are you going to fold to the pressure? Are you going to conform to the crowd? Are you going to choose what everybody else is choosing instead, the familiar? Okay? So that's our two choices. as always, leave your rebuttals in the comments, right? I'm interested in your side of the story. Would you agree with me, or would you choose a different path? Okay. So thanks for listening to Breaking the System. If this episode has challenged your thinking, share it with someone like always that may need to hear it. I know this one was a little bit more religious. Sometimes we throw those in here. Sometimes that we stick to the political pander of the world. But as always, anytime that we can find a question, a challenging question to make us think critical, we're going to bring that to the table and we're going to talk about it. So I would love you to review and rate this episode. Join us next time as we continue questioning systems that shape us and the courage it takes to break the ones that need changed. Until then, stay willing to see beyond the surface. As always, thanks for tuning in. I have also linked the 4 other ways that you can listen to Breaking the System on our podcast on YouTube, Spotify, Amazon, and Apple Play. All of those are uploaded daily. So we appreciate it. Thanks. We'll see you guys next time. Have a good Friday.